Hi. It's been a second, and I really haven't had any desire to make videos until quite recently, for one reason or another. So, right before they announce whatever it is next for Sandstorm today, which hopefully is another Fortnite skin, I'm here to talk about what I think may come based off of where we're at right now in the sandbox. Now, full disclaimer, not only do I have virtually no insider information in regards to what is or isn't happening, but when April 15th does roll around and they tease the next update, it could be exactly as underwhelming as last time when they basically took an hour to show us a poster and not even have the courtesy to tell us the name of the gun kind of visible in it.
There's maybe some other things you can pick up from that image. That does kind of look like a castle.
So not only would I not look here for what's next, I wouldn't even personally get super hyped for their typically underwhelming dev stream, but we'll see. Point is, it could still be weeks before we know anything really interesting. It's safe to say we're getting a map and like 2 guns, and personally I'd be surprised for anything else because they haven't really said much more and I haven't come to expect anything less. Now, I promised this video from my 3,000 subscriber special, and I have well over double that now, so I might as well fulfill like one of the things I said before I get to 10k and just get cemented as like the laziest YouTuber alive. So without any further ado, let's just jump into what's more of a personal wish list and hopefully sort of accurate roadmap, not based on what I'd like, but more for the sake of a few rather, let's say, ignored classes.
How come you ain't never liked me?
Bitch! I'm Six Snipes and you're watching This Week in Sandstorm. For the sake of clarity, yes, this is sort of a top 10 guns in really no particular order. Either I think they should add some of these, or I just sort of want them to based off of what is kind of absent from the game. I'm not going to give a whole guide and history lesson on each and every one because I might have to later, I don't know, and they will come in pairs because with the exception of the Alpha AK and the Well Rod, every gun has been added with at least what would be considered an equivalent to the other team. Like for every Tabor, there's an Ace, and for every Honey Badger, there's a Val, and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, the first 2 admissions are pretty much the easiest picks they could do and the fastest way to make a lot of people happy with the RPK and AWS platforms. Because the gunner class truthfully only has 5 weapons between both sides, it's safe to say the best play at this point for the NWI team seems to be throwing the most deceased and decrepit demographic of players a bone for the first time since Obama was in office. I'd say this is the logical choice because with these 2 guns, most of the assets to create them are effectively already present. For the uninitiated, the RPK is just an AK with a heavier duty barrel and magazine / bolt assembly to optimize it for a lighter squad gunner role. It's often equipped with banana mags on the chonkier end or even just straight up drums, and they have more or less 95% of the model of this gun in its magazines already. It wouldn't be hard to just drop an AK that shoots harder and farther with maybe a 40 round default magazine and the ability to extend that to something like 60 or even 75. I know it's something a lot of gunner class mains have been asking for a while now and just makes sense as there's already a ton of AK variants and there's really no reason to stop where we are. More on that later. To my understanding, the AWS is more of the same, but with the AR-15 platform, it's just beefier and designed to throw more heat than the average M4A1. Both of these guns, but particularly the RPK, are hugely nostalgic from Battlefield 4, and I would easily love to see that and the AWS with its G-Cup Badonkers magazine making their way into Insurgency one day. And really, I personally wouldn't stop there for gunners either, because there's obviously a precedent for upwards of 4 guns in a singular update for a class, so in the perfect world, those would be the 2 easy picks, like the Grease Gun and the Stin were for Nightfall, while the next 2 would be the M60 and the RPD machine guns respectively, the more high-end Honey Badger and AS Val sort of deal. Even more than the last 2, they're both easily certified hood classics. As a matter of fact, virtually every time I check out the Reddit, someone is asking for one of these, and to be perfectly honest, if I had to put money on the next content update, this would at least be in it. That or something stupid like a deagle. Basically, the Vietnam gun plus really cool single wood-furnished MG that fits right with the theme of just about every other insurgent weapon. It's worth noting either of these could be interchangeable with the Stoner machine gun, named for Eugene Stoner, who also invented the AR-15 platform. It was basically a belt-fed, which was also used extensively around the same time. I think basically all of the guns I've just listed, plus rice fields, the map, no, not tideway, would make the most well-rounded, historically grounded, and utterly without the presence of a better word, poggers update ever. And there's pretty much two other demographics of weapon virtually entirely neglected for more than a little bit, the lesser of the two being handguns, as a matter of fact, as we haven't had any conventionalist editions as long as I've played the game, actually, and even though I think it's been well established that since the well rod we don't really need any new ones, it's still nice to see variety. The other advantage being any added secondary probably means every class can have them, as we have yet to see any role-specific models so far in the handgun department. Most people I see ask for a heavier caliber hand cannon sort of deal, and I think that's rather redundant given a realistic setting where the typical traits of heavier handguns in most games is a one-shot headshot, and that's just what we call Tuesday here in Sandstorm. But regardless, I don't care, and I still think a nice set of high caliber revolvers may be in order.
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
I would personally submit the Chiappa Rhino for security, an Italian-made and relatively modernist design which I could see used in action, and maybe something more classic like a Remington model for insurgents, or even something like the Unica 6 from Battlefield 4, which was just the best thing ever. It may be obvious I'm not super well versed in handguns, much less revolvers, but off the top of my head, both of those would be stellar, and while competitively speaking probably not the greatest thing ever, still a welcome addition and bringer of variety to every class. The last couple sets of weapons I would suggest are highly subjective, as they're not per se rare. As a matter of fact, given their role, I would venture to guess just as many people may hate to see these next two added as much as the people who want them, but regardless, I'm more of the pro-diversity side, and seeing as there's only two of them, it's high time we got some shotgun variety. Now, a lot of people who basically get cyberbullied already are probably going to get triggered when I say that alone, but I'm not even done, because with basically any game, the problem with shotguns is they often just feel too close anyways. Like, all pump actions just get sort of used until people figure out the one which does marginally the best damage or whatever in most shooters, because really they don't feel all that different. So my suggestion is the easiest way to make something tangibly independent from the other two pumps is something with a gas system, i.e. semi-auto shotguns. Yeah, they'd be ridiculous, but that's okay, seeing as it's not like the Barrett 50 cal and the anti-materials in general just don't do the same thing anyways. The most likely candidates wouldn't even be anything you can just reload in an instant, so probably still tube-fed, but still skate fast and eat ass like any good speed softer or Titanfall player would have. If I were to guess, the M1014 is probably the security choice. It's a classical model employed by the Marines, FBI, SWAT, and many other operators under the US, just because it's basically a powerhouse. I never really had a positive image of it because my introduction to it was in Siege, and if you know anything about it in there, you know that it's hot trash, but having used it in Battlefield just for footage, I could get behind it. The Insurgent counterpart is another easy pick and instant classic with the Spaz 12. Now, I imagine half of you may agree and the other half is saying, no, that's a pump action. But both of you are actually right. The reality is the Spaz is cool because it's just a firearm, unlike most shotguns, designed to chamber just about any round that can fit into it. Yes, it does fire in pump action, but only when using lower power rounds and capable of cycling its gas system. That would be things like rubber bullets or maybe birdshot, I don't know. The real big boy bullets kick hard enough, meanwhile, to make manually cycling the weapon unnecessary, so it can just fire in semi-regularly. The only reason anyone thinks it's pump action is because all of those 90 movies wanting to make their actors do that shoddy pump, and all the video game devs basing their knowledge off of that. So yeah, two semi-auto shotguns, and those are the real popular ones I think most people like to see in their games. And if you think that's stupid, those aren't even really the shotguns I'd personally like to see or what may be coming. Of course, they could add two absurd mammoths of guns to Insurgency, primarily the Saiga 12. If you're not familiar with the Saiga, it's just the answer to the age-old question of what could possibly happen if you went on a mission to make an AK capable of chambering way too many absurd ammunition types. No, I'm not talking about that guy. The Saiga 12 shoots 12 gauge shells and by extension anything between steel bearings to slugs or even molten death. The Big Chungus Kalashnikov is my personal favorite variant because of this, and most notably because not only does it fire in semi or even full auto depending on the variants, but also takes that beefy boy magazine. Meaning, unlike the average Nerf gun from 2006, you're not painstakingly loading each round individually like a sad boy. In fact, you're just dropping and popping new ones faster than NWI can replace its new development stack. Basically, it's just the dictionary definition of really, really stupid.
My guess is that didn't go too well for him.
The only gun I could think rival that stupidity would of course be the absolute sledgehammer that is the AA-12. Basically the same thing, magazine fed, 12 gauge, full auto, entirely absurd. Either of those choices probably won't happen. Maybe they'll decide to go for an auto 12 gauge or semi-auto 12 gauge. I can't imagine they'd reduce the range given how dedicated they are to making shotguns a more accurate representation in Sandstorm, so maybe they'd just be super, super expensive or attachment heavy. But overall, that's just my guesses. An honorable mention in something I think deserves its own video is actually the F and Hercel P90, which given an accurate representation in this or really any game would just make every other PDW look silly. This is really what I myself would like to see added more than anything else, but given the idea of a gun that holds 50 armor-piercing bullets and beat out the MP7 as the UN certified most Kyle choice for operators, I'm not entirely sure one could be added without being either lazily inaccurate like Siege or Battlefield or else utterly broken by nature. Not to mention the FN57 companion sidearm would probably make a Glock a historical relic overnight, given a way higher base capacity and tendency to slice through Kevlar like butter. I think all of that though summarizes my general thoughts on the current sandbox. If you agree as an intellectual or somehow believe that your rifleman needs something stupid like an F2000, please feel free to keep it civil in the comments down below, but disagree as you may. Until then, when my next video is probably critiquing the Brave edition of Skull Trooper, I'm Six Snipes, and this has been your Week in Sandstorm.
That didn't go too well for him.